So how's it going, everybody? I'm Hanif. I'm the web director for U of T Developers, and this is the second lecture in a series of lectures about the web. So this lecture specifically is going to be about JavaScript and sort of how we can use JavaScript to make your web pages dynamic and do cool things with the web using JavaScript. So as a quick note, this lecture is going to be hopefully a lot shorter than the last one. I'm going to provide like sort of more resources to go and do different things. This is going to be more of like a introduction to what can be done with JavaScript, because there's a lot of stuff that you can do with it. So let's jump in. So according to Wikipedia, JavaScript is a interpreted computer programming language and was originally implemented. It was actually originally implemented with Netscape forever ago, so that client-side scripts can interact with the user, control the browser, communicate asynchronously, and change the web page basically. So it can do a lot of cool things. So as a note, I mean, you can read a lot of this stuff. It's kind of Wikipedia tends to have a lot of information that you don't necessarily need to know, but it's definitely very cool. So as a quick note, I'm not really going to be going over the syntax for JavaScript. I'm not going to talk about how loops are done and how functions are done and things like that. I'm just going to sort of go directly into examples and things that will help you. So all of this stuff is luckily and wonderfully already covered by Codecademy. So I'm looking at their JavaScript track right now. So if you're unfamiliar with JavaScript, or unfamiliar with any language similar to JavaScript, so there are languages very similar to JavaScript, like C. It's basically a lot of the syntax is inspired by C. If you ever use C, if you use C++, if you use Java, if you used PHP, then you'll be sort of, JavaScript will look like something very, very familiar to you. If you're more familiar with Ruby or Python or languages like that, then you might want to go through this. But it's really up to you. So I'm going to start with sort of a very basic example of what we can do with JavaScript, and then I'll go into sort of more dynamic things, actually manipulating elements and crazy things like that. Okay, so here I have an HTML page open in the browser. I know it doesn't look like much, but here it is. So a quick note, somebody asked me this in the last lecture, so I'll just show you how I do it. So I'll drag this on screen. So this is what the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript look like. So I just have them all in one folder, and to open it up in the browser, you don't really have to do much. You just sort of click on the HTML file and it opens. So you don't need to have a server set up or anything. If you want to work on something that's just pure client side, just JavaScript, CSS, HTML, then you don't need to set up a server. If you do want to do server side stuff that includes like talking to databases and things like that, then you will need one, which we'll go over in sort of next lectures. Anyhow, just so that everybody knows. So what's going on here? So here I just have your basic HTML page set up, just like in the last lecture. There's not much. There's just sort of, I'm linking a style sheet, I'm linking a CSS file, and I'm linking a couple JavaScript files. So I'll go over what this one is later, but this one right here is just sort of the JS file that you see right here. So real quick, I want to go over sort of the debugging features and the developer features that most browsers provide. So here we have a very simple program. It's just we're looping through 10 numbers, and then for each number we're printing out loop number, whatever loop it is, whatever number. So what does this look like? When we refresh the page, we see nothing, but we have this console.log statement. So in all browsers, or most browsers anyway, there is a console. So how do we get to that console? So this is Chrome, and you can do this in basically every every browser, including Internet Explorer. So we inspect the element, and we click on this console tab right here. So if you'll notice, we'll see loop number 0, loop number 1, loop number 2, all the way going to 9. So it goes from 0 to 9. So we can change this, for example, we can initialize I to be 1, and then I is smaller than 10. We can make it say smaller than equal to, and that should go from 1 to 10. So if we refresh this, where are we? Nah, why am I wrong? Did I not save it? There we go. Loop number 1 all the way to 10. So that's, one thing you can do. But the real reason I've done this is so that I can show you sort of like some of the debugging features that are available. So one great thing is in this console we can type in the name of any variable that's in the current context. So if I can actually type in I, it'll say that it's 11 right now, which makes sense. So let's do something really interesting. So if we go to sources, I'll just show you from scratch. So we can show the navigator, and we'll see all the files and stuff that are included here. So let's go to jsexamples.js. We'll see our program here. And then we can actually put a breakpoint. So if you're familiar with debuggers, you'll know what this is. This basically says I want to stop the program there and then see what I can do. So if we refresh the page, then we have a breakpoint right here. We've caught it the first time. And if we go and see what I is, it's 1, right? So let's continue the program. Breakpoint catches again. And then if we can type in I, and now I is 2. So really simple stuff. And we can actually even put like watch statements. We can go see I wanna keep an eye on like, for example, that variable there. You can put your cursor over and see what it is. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do. But anyway, let's continue this program. Go all the way to the end. And then I remove the breakpoint, and then if I type in I, then you'll see that it's 11 again. So that's some of the really cool stuff that you can do with the debugger, which is really helpful. Okay, so let's actually do something interesting with JavaScript, interacting with the elements and things. Alright, so let's move into doing something interesting. So you'll notice that I have made a button that says click me. So I know it's tempting, but we're not going to click it yet. So instead I'm going to show you something else. So before I go into examples that that involve more stuff with HTML, I want to talk a little bit about some concepts with JavaScript that are important before we move on. So JavaScript is very much an event-based language. That means that something happens, and then we'll sort of do something in response to that. Additionally, there's another concept that is in JavaScript, but is also in a lot of other languages, which is called either a closure or an anonymous function. So it's sort of like this function that can sometimes be used as a variable, can sometimes be used and passed around and things like that, instead of just being something you call. So this is one example of one of those. So we're setting a variable to this variable x to be a function that will alert hello world. And then here we're just calling x. So just to show you, if I comment this out and refresh the page, then nothing happens. However, if I let myself actually call x, then on load, then we see hello world. So this is a concept that'll kind of show up a lot. Anyway, so let's actually do something. So this click me button, if we look at the HTML, the ID of the button is just click me. So real quick, the library that I'm using, there's sort of something that I'm using here. I'm including this thing called jQuery. So jQuery is a library of functions that makes your life way easier. There are other libraries like it, and jQuery is just a very, very popular one that most people use. So there are sort of native JavaScript ways of doing what I'm about to do, but I would recommend not doing that and instead using something like jQuery. And then if you're really keen, you can sort of read through jQuery and see what it does. On a very high level, what jQuery does is it makes your life easier in providing functionality for you that it's either not there natively or it's sort of complicated to use natively. And the second thing it does is it sort of levels the playing field between the different browsers. So certain browsers provide certain things, certain browsers provide other different things, and so sometimes they do things differently. So jQuery will try to sort of maintain browser compatibility with everything you write, so you don't have to sort of think about the differences between browsers. When programming with jQuery, you can just sort of do it automatically. So jQuery is documented here. It's sort of a description of jQuery and how to use it and things. And then you can go to the API documentation, which will have sort of all the functions that jQuery provides. So we're not going to be using all of these, we're going to use some of them. But you can definitely go through this and sort of see what jQuery provides, because it's a lot of stuff. In any case, let's actually do something. So this is click me, so let's make something that allows us to do something when it says click me. So every jQuery function starts with the $. We're going to write click me, and I'll explain what it does after. Click me dot click, and then we'll put an anonymous function in here. So basically what this will do is it'll call the function that we wrote when the click event is triggered. So let's just say alert. Yay. It's happy we clicked it. And it says yay. Awesome. Okay, so we've seen so far this button, click me, saying yay, giving us a pop-up that says yay. So you're probably thinking to yourself that you can probably do a lot more with jQuery, with JavaScript and things like that. And the answer would be, well, you're absolutely right, you can do a lot more. So let's make our button even more insistent. So to this click me, we're going to create another event. But we're not going to make it a click event, we're going to make it a mouse over event. Something else I'll show you is you can reuse jQuery objects right here. So this selector right here that we've made, it's uses CSS selectors. But this right here creates sort of like an object representing that button there, and then you can reuse it. So we can say, we can create, let's call it button equals this right here, and now we can just say button dot click. All right, so this this sort of saves on performance, so that we don't have to sort of, because what it does is when you do this, it kind of goes through the HTML and creates this object, so we don't have to do that twice. So we've created this mouse over function, so let's do something interesting. I'm going to say this dot HTML, make it very insistent. And then we're also going to change the CSS, so you can chain things in HTML. So you can, you can chain things in jQuery. So you can do one function call, and then do another one right after with this sort of continuing the dot notation. So we'll change it so that the CSS property color is changed to red. Let's close that up and see this working. So so we've satisfied it. So let's do something else. Let us revert it back to what it was before on the mouse out event. So the mouse out event is very similar to the mouse over event, except it's kind of the opposite. So mouse over is when you hover your mouse over the element, sort of self-explanatory, and mouse out is when you removed it. So let's do the opposite. So we're going to change the color to black, and then the HTML will be what is it normally? I think it's click me. Let's just make sure. Yeah, let's try that. Very cool. So let's do some other stuff. Alright, so we have something more interesting now. We have a form that basically has your first name and your last name and an enter button. So let's see what we can do with this. So let's first quickly look at the HTML. So the HTML is within a form tag. Inside we have sort of an input field with ID first name and another one with ID last name, and then a button with ID enter. Alright, so let's first do something with the on click of the enter button. So by the way, normally when you have a form like this, you'd send it server side and the server would do some stuff with it, but because we're not covering those things now, we're not going to do that. It's all going to be client side. So let's do some stuff. So first, let's do something with the actually, let me just go ahead and this is not something you normally do with this type of item, but let's make the class enter so that I can just show you what that looks like with the selector. So exactly with CSS, it just becomes a dot instead. So we're going to say dot enter dot click. I'll write this function here. So let's say that we want an alert. Let's say hey, you know what? Let's do hi, and then I'm gonna call it first name. Dot val. This is just the value that's inside. Put a space. So by the way, plus is like when you concatenate strings in JavaScript. And then we'll do last name dot val. Last name dot val. Let's add an exclamation mark because this is obviously a very happy form. So let's just see if it's working. So let's add my name in there. Oh, sorry. Let's do something here. So what this is doing, by the way, is it's actually submitting the form. So we want to disable the submission. So we want actually, this is a great way of showing you what I do when I don't know actually how to do something, or I don't remember how to do something. So let's disable default jQuery. Event.prevent default. So let's put event in here. Stop whatever normally happens from happening. And let's try this again. By the way, Stack Overflow is a pretty legit place if you don't know what you're doing. Same thing with Google, just type in what you think you should happen and you'll usually find something. So there we go. Let's sing my name. Hi, Hanif. If I put something crazy like John Smith, do the same thing. Okay. So let's do something more interesting with this. So we've learned now about this val, .val. We've learned about prevent default. So you can even do things like, for example, with an anchor tag with a link, you can sort of prevent it from doing the automatic behavior, which is to go to that link. So you can prevent it from doing that. You can do some stuff, maybe, I don't know, some pre-processing or whatever you want to do, and then you can make it do whatever you want. So there are lots of interesting things you can do with JavaScript. Like, we're not even scratching the surface right now. This is just sort of like an introduction to what you can do. So let's do some ego stroking things. So let's say that on first name dot change is a change event. So all these events are documented in the jQuery API stuff that I showed you earlier. So you can go take a look. So we're going to say if this dot val equals Hanif, then let's just alert nice name dude. So this is becoming sort of like an outlet for my ego. Well, not really, but let's see what happens. So Hanif, and then we have nice name dude. Okay, so we've gone and covered sort of events. We've covered the debugger. We've covered a lot of different things. We covered jQuery, different types of events, different things you can do. You can change HTML. You can change CSS. You can get the value of a form. I've shown you alerts and consoles and things like that. So this is not even half of the things you can do, but it's a pretty great start. I highly recommend going to codecademy.com and checking out specifically the web fundamentals. I think I recommended that earlier, but checking out the JavaScript course to see what's under the hood of jQuery, and then you can go take a look at jQuery to actually do some stuff like HTML and CSS and things like that to manipulate those things. Okay, so I think that's basically it for the content of this lecture, but I'm going to go over sort of the project that you guys will be working on in class. Okay, so what I'm going to get you to do real quick, pretty simple, I'm going to get you to make a tic-tac-toe game. So that means, like, in lecture, when we actually have class, the thing that we'll all be working on together will be building a tic-tac-toe game. So if you just do a Google search for JavaScript tic-tac-toe, you'll see a ton of stuff. You know, it's a very easy game to make. Not too much going into it. So there's a couple of examples. Like, this is one that has like a sort of computer playing against it. There's another one here, you know, nothing super fancy, but it also has a computer playing against it. So that's actually not, you don't have to go and make a computer or anything like that. I'd be happy with just sort of a grid, and then the ability to click on the grid, and then sort of like an X appears or an O appears or whatever. That would be good enough. If you wanted to make something super impressive, you can make it like really, really pretty, very nice grid. You could add a computer if you wanted. That's really up to you. Just the minimum would be, you know, clicking on boxes, and then like X's or O's would show up. That's basically it. So that's the project for next week. So if you have any questions, you can ask that in lecture, or if you have something that you'd like to ask ahead of time, you can email me at web@uftdev.ca. And yeah, that's basically it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in lecture.